Hey, we're back with another Plat Chat preview. I'm once again the host. I've been put in this role because Josh is still, he's seen Bryn's Nan. Doesn't have great internet currently. And we're here with Custa, reinforced, myself, Josh, Sideshow, as is colloquially known. And we're talking about the Atlanta Reign today. The Atlanta Reign, an exciting team. I think a team that some people are looking to, big up, to become bigger than their last season, do better than their last season, which is going to be tough because they had a good season. Let's kind of run it down the list, right? Let's run it down the list here. When we look at this team overall and we look at like the paradigm Overwatch 2, we have to, of course, talk about the DPS of this team, driving this team, and their newest addition, Speedily. Like, what do we think about this heading into the next season?
Definitely one of the best DPS lines that Atlanta Reign has had, but they've also had some nasty good DPS lines in the past, and it hasn't necessarily translated to success. That isn't what actually made last year good for Atlanta. They didn't win it because Pelican was amazing. I mean, Pelican was amazing, but that wasn't why they won or they didn't win the league. But that wasn't why they won so many games and made it to the grand finals. I think though that this team is well-rounded enough that they're, again, not relying on their DPS line, but it's a fantastic asset to have. The addition of Speedily just makes this cracked, like absolutely cracked. Like Nero's essentially, I guess, becoming a bit of a fill player until Speedily becomes of age, which is a monstrous thing to have. Nero is a caliber of player that could easily be starting for an entire season, and instead almost seems like a bit of a placeholder when you look at the rest of the players there.
Okay,
Custa is muted.
Oh, Scott, hello?
Hello.
You're muted.
Can you hear me? I'm stuck in a well. I think this is the most versatile Atlanta Reign team that we've seen. Every time I've usually seen Atlanta Reign in previous seasons, there's always been like a hole somewhere, or like, oh, maybe like they can't really do this meta too well, or maybe this could be awkward. I think they have probably one of the best well-rounded rosters in the entirety of the league, because like they have the 4 DPS once Speedily comes of age, so that'll give them the flexibility. But as Josh said, like Nero could easily play the entire season, and I would be okay with that, right? And same thing with like all the other players. Like Venom can come in. If we're in a hard tracer meta, Venom is like spouted by a lot of NA people as like the best NA tracer, and like just in terms of like he's been playing in the NA region. And then you have Gator Hawk. They have 2 tanks. Both are very, very flexible at what they do. I think there's just so many good things about this roster that, you know, in the past, we've sort of been like, oh, they're a Brawl team, or like, especially last year, they played a majority of Brawl or Double Shield. I think you'll see a lot more flexibility from this team, and I'm not worried about them coming to the season. I'm pretty sure, I'll say it, I'm pretty sure this is like a top 5 team. Pretty safe. Hey, Bo.
Oh, top 5 team. Johnny, do you agree with that? I mean,
does that include APAC or just top 5 NA?
I'm going to include APAC.
So top 5 in the world with Shanghai, Chengdu, Dallas Fuel, LA Gladiators, and I guess it's it's them over Shock, and
I think they have. I think they are more solid. I think there is a chance that Shock is, Shock and a bunch of those other teams just don't hit that performance level.
Look, yeah, I respect the opinion. I think there's a ton of talent on this roster. There is. You guys are right, but Speedily comes of age late into the season. Okay, August 26th, I believe is the date. Nero, he's going to have to fill that flex DPS spot until then. And let's be real, he didn't have the best of seasons on the San Francisco Shock last year. I don't think that was his individual fault necessarily. That just was a team that couldn't really come together and work out some of the kinks with that team. But they still had a pretty decent playoff run. But, I think we can agree that Speedily on specifically Echo is like stronger in Nero to that regard. He has bigger playmaking skills and can impact the game a lot more instead of just flexing around on some different kinds of heroes. He did have a pretty good year on Guangzhou in 2019, Nero. But point being, there's tons of talent on this team.
Torb as well.
Torb, good Junkrat. But I'm not so sure about the flexibility part of this team.
Is this specifically on the? Remember, we're trying to break it down, keep it organized here. Is this specifically on the DPS?
Oh, sorry.
No, I mean the DPS. I think it's fine because I think you'll just have Kai in the back, like in the back of your team, just like playing long range hit scan, and I think you're fine in that regard. I think Nero can do a good job filling in all these different heroes. So the flexibility with the DPS line of Avast is pretty good, and Venom is a good tracer. So yes, as it relates to the DPS line, there is no reason for concern when it comes to flexibility, and Speedily will provide
a top 5
utmost
DPS
of
line?
Gameplay towards the end of the season.
Would we agree then with Scott's assessment that this DPS line could be a top 5 DPS line?
I've not given that enough
whether
thought.
you count speedily from the beginning.
Okay.
Like, if maybe coming into the playoffs, possibly, but there's too many crack DPS lines in the league overall to be even considering that as an important characteristic, I think, for Overwatch 2. Yeah, of course, it's a prerequisite that your DPS line has to be nutty if you're going to win next year. But that is not by any means the most important thing, I don't think. There's going to be tons of teams that have insanely good DPS.
Yeah, just like quickly recollecting, I don't think they're top 5. No, I mean, there's so many good DPS lineups.
Okay, so the DPS line is good, but maybe not top 5. Well, then maybe let's go to the other parts of the same. Let's talk about the tanks. Let's talk about the tanks. Tanks are a big topic of conversation for Overwatch 2. We got Gator, we have Hawk. What are our thoughts on the tank line here headed to Overwatch 2 after a very good 2021 performance?
Well, here's where I think it starts to get into the wider conversation, but I'll try and keep it tank focused for the second, which is I agree with Custa in that this team looks more flexible than it did in the past, and I think that's a debate we should definitely have with Jonathan once we get into the team as an overall. But one of the parts here is that Gator is not going to be the only main tank on the team. He's going to be trading time with Hawk. It should give them way more flexibility in terms of different metas that they have access to by virtue of having so many different tanks that they can rely on. But one of the things you're going to lack, I think, whenever Gator's out of the lineup is the leadership aspect that he brings to the table. And that's also gone with Massa too, which I'm sure we'll discuss when we get onto the supports. So it feels like, to me, they have insanely talented players and can go in more directions now. Even if you just think about the tank line, they can go in more directions. But it might come at the cost of that leadership and cohesion that had been doing really well last year. And that's my only concern with having Gator and Hawk rotating, because I think otherwise they fill the roles quite nicely. Sure, Gator's not going to be able to play like the old Orisa, but I don't see any reason why Gator wouldn't be fine as a main tank player alongside Hawk for to cover the new tanks in Overwatch 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, they're pretty flexible and they certainly specialize on certain heroes. Like if you need to play a Reinhardt composition and you got Gator in the lineup, like you're good. Like that's one of the best Reinhardts in the league you'll come across. You should be very happy having Gator play Reinhardt for you. And then, of course, Hawk had his best season last year playing primarily the D.Va. I think he had like 22 hours on D.Va and his SAR was like 3 hours or something. It was considerably less, or Sigma, sorry. I think he played considerably less of the other off tanks and played some Sigma, but mostly D.Va. But point being, I think Hawk can flex over to those other heroes. I don't think that's a big issue. I think what they lack, perhaps, and what I'm worried about is like when you start talking about even stuff like Winston to an extent, or like Wrecking Ball, Doomfist, the more divier kind of heroes. And if you want to especially incentivize like players like Venom to play Tracer to the utmost of potential, or if you want to incentivize Speedily to come into the lineup and make his Echo like shine the brightest he can, like you need to be able to play some of those divier tank heroes to a very high level. And I guess that is what I'm concerned about. I'm not saying Gator and Hawk can't do it, because they are two respectable, above average league main tanks, but I have my concerns, I guess, similar to when we discuss other teams. We have concerns about their flexibility and stuff like that. I too have my concerns about this team when it comes to the more aggressive divier heroes in that regard, I'd say.
Okay. Custa, do you think there's a tank flexibility issue here potentially?
No, I think that's like one of the things that I like the most about this team. We see a lot of teams having only an off tank, only a main tank, or having like a really good main tank who is like integral to the calls, like Sideshow said, and an off tank who's average, who doesn't have great calls. So like there are holes within the tank line. I think Gator can easily play these dive heroes. I don't think he can't. And is he as good as like some of the, Fearless or like Fate? Probably not. But I think he can definitely hold his own. And I think Gator and Hawk are both, I really like both of those players in both of their roles. So that covers off Overwatch 2 wherever we end up in Overwatch 2 with main tank or off tank. I think that's good. And I think they are, with both of them together and their combined strength of that, top 5 tank line in the league.
Okay, a little bit of a split opinion there. A little bit of a.
I'm gonna keep saying it, and you guys are gonna get more upset. Yeah.
I mean, look,
Dude,
okay.
but they could be a top 5 team without having a top 5 DPS line and a top 5 tank line, right? Like you could have a top 7 everything and still make top 5 because other teams are good in one area but shit in another. You know what I mean? Like you don't actually have to be top 5 in everything to make top 5.
My whole reason of why I'm saying they're top 5, and the reason I keep reinforcing this point, is I think in their role, I am confident that they are there. While there are a lot of other teams where I have a lot of big question marks, like the San Francisco Shock with Kaluge on tank, the only tank that they have. I feel way more confident about Gator Hawk than I do feel about Kaluge on the tank, or some other teams which have these other tanks which are unproven, or just maybe don't have that flexibility that they're going to be required to have.
Yeah, but the mad thing is that you actually might be right if you rank them all out in terms of having faith in flexibility, because most teams have only gone with like a single tank player, and that just, I mean, you just insta lose when you're talking about flexibility, and it's 2v1, and one of them's like, you know, only played off tank or main tank before. But there are definitely, I feel insanely more confident about tank lines like Shanghai or Dallas, where the tanks themselves are outrageously flexible, rather than Gator and Hawk. Gator and Hawk have the massive advantage over teams that are only sticking with one player in terms of like the floor is more steady. I'm not saying the ceiling is higher, but the floor is more steady. Like,
but do you not believe in Gator? Like with off tank, like he's shown that he can play Sigma at the highest level. He can probably play Zaya. I've seen him play Hog. Like he's nutty at Hog. Like,
Hawk?
No, Gator. Like I think Gator, if you wanted to have that all-round encompassing player, I would feel more confident, because I think it's harder for off tanks to pick up main tank roles. But I think like Gator has shown, other than Diva, so if we end up in a hard Diva meta, Hawk can play it. But otherwise, you can probably play Gator, but Hawk can also fill some of those roles depending on the situation. Like I don't see a situation of any tank being played in Overwatch 2 where I don't feel good about either of these players.
But what about the ones that Jonathan was mentioning? The Winston, the Ball, the Doomfist.
Gator
I don't really understand.
Gator can play those.
Gator?
Yeah, I think Gator can play those. Like I don't. I think Gator is heavily underappreciated. Everyone just thinks he's like kind of like the super effect, right? Of everyone thinks he's a Ryan one trick because they've always played Ryan. Yes, that's what he's great at. But we're going into remember, we're going into the dark. No one knows anything about anything that we're touching. And the more flexibility you have, the more high I am on your team, because really, there's a world in which, like, to use the Shock Kaluge as an example, where it's just a Diva meta and the Shock is perfectly fine. But there is tons of other situations where Reinhardt ends up meta. Well, all of a sudden Kaluge is outclassed because he never played Ryan at the highest level. All of a sudden Winston becomes hard meta. That's a hard character to learn. As much as there's a simple kit, there's a lot of difficulty and intricacies of that. Like, that is what I like about Gator Hawk.
Okay, if you want to go out there, if you want to go out on a limb and say that you believe Gator can do that and you have trust in him being able to play those heroes, okay, that's fine. You know, if I do this with some other teams and players that I like, that I'm just like, I positively, I'm optimistic about it. But then I look at stuff just like in 3 seasons, Gator has played 4 hours of Winston. In 3 seasons, Gator has played 4 hours of Wrecking Ball. And like, if you want to assume that's fine, I'm just not willing to just like put the cart before the horse and be like, it'll be fine.
But at the same time, I mean, I'm not willing to for the Wrecking Ball, but that is only one real pick, and like same with the Doomfist. But he did play. I mean, what the zombie comp stuff that Atlanta Rain were really good at was with him playing Winston. So I understand that that's a bit of a like. It's not a standard Winston gameplay really. It's like you are playing all in, getting hard pocketed by Lucio Moira, rather than having to play around like vision and timing your engages based off other people's information. You know, it is a very different play style, but he has had success whilst playing the Winston, even though he didn't play very much of it. I still
okay.
There are so many unknowables with every team's tank line. Yeah. I'm not mad about this one at all. I think they're going to be towards the top end of. They're one of the safest tank lines in terms of things that could go wrong.
Safest is a great word. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a very safe tank line.
Condense it into safe. Okay, so we have a safe tank line, and we have a maybe backloaded DPS line with Speedily coming in later season. So let's look at supports. We got OG Ultraviolet with Masa exiting the team, Iris having exited the team. Now we've gotten the other Zoomer DPS duo from NA, OG Ultraviolet. We look at this support line. What do we think?
This is where the flexibility component comes in for me again, I think, because you have a backline that I think is going to be capable of playing, obviously, the like classic flex support, main support kind of thing. But I think I've got confidence that OG is capable enough to be able to pick up some flex support stuff as well to bolster that if double flex support does become meta. And then on top of that too, I think one of the things that gets undersold with Atlanta Reign last year actually is how fucking much Iris played BAP constantly for them. Constantly. And it's not that Ultraviolet's bad at BAP, but he's also going to be playing a ton of other stuff for them. And you don't have that like comfort territory of Lucio Batiste that seemed ever present with Massa and Iris. And maybe that's just an outsider's POV. Maybe they really did believe that BAP was just broken, so Iris always had to play it or something. But that team forced it so hard, even when it seemed clear the meta was going in other directions and they were trying to battle against the tide. And they found success with it for sure. But I like the idea that this roster has so many more directions they can go into without sacrificing the skill level of these players.
Yeah, like I can piggyback on that as well. Like OG UV, like these guys have like been expected for so long, and I think they're going to perform at the level that they are needed. Like we've seen so many rookies come out of like not just Korea but North America come into the league and then just be like, oh, these guys are like way better than the other flex supports, like especially like North American flex supports and like main supports. There's been a lot of misses, especially over the last couple of years of like players like going down. These guys, I expect them to be able to step into the role. I agree with Josh. I think OG has the ability to play double flex and it to be fine. So that means you don't need to play that double flex. I really like the support lineup. There's a chance in which they just don't perform in the league as we had hoped for them. Like kind of like Gator and Hawk when they first came in 2020, right? We were like, Gator and Hawk coming from contenders, they're going to be the best, and they were fine. They weren't like the dominance that we saw from them in 2021. But if OG and Ultraviolet can hit the ground running, like I really like this support lineup. I'm not going to say they're a top 5 support lineups. There's some really good support lineups out there, but they could be.
I almost like this support lineup like the most within the entire team. Like I think this support line is really good. I think if Atlanta Reign fans, they feel like they lost out on Iris going to Houston Outlaws and they're just like, oh, we lost our playmaking support. Like towards the end of the season, Iris' ability to make plays and just like win fights and get frags was like unbelievable. It was really good. Iris started to like really come into being a top flex support. I think Ultraviolet is going to step into that. From the VODs that I've seen, like Ultraviolet has that ability to just like do the right things at the right time and just turn these fights around, whether it's like biotic grenades or like a perfect nano boost, just game awareness, the way he reacts to the game. I think Ultraviolet is a really good flex support, and I think he's going to enter that role and replace Iris really well. And OG is like a really good main support to go alongside with him. So obviously, I think this is a really good support backline. I think this is, if anything, going to just aid the rest of the team. Like having a consistent good backline like this is just going to help your DPS department, where like Venom comes in as a tracer one trick, and you have Nero trying to flex over to some of these other heroes and like work with Kai, and you have these tanks trying to figure out like the roles they play, playing single tank, playing some new heroes potentially. I think having a stable support lineup like this with OG and Ultraviolet is going to be such a relief. It's going to make everything so much easier for this team throughout the season. So I'm a big fan of this backline. I really can't wait to see Ultraviolet in the league.
Do either of you know anything about these two players in terms of like their personality or leadership figures or comms or anything like that? Because I really don't. Unfortunately, that's always the
I
last
was
thing
under
we
the
learn about these
impression
guys.
that Reiner was like a big driver of like the comms for their teams, because
Right.
they played with Reiner as like their tank a lot for American Tornado. But I am not totally certain, so don't quote me on that. I'm not super certain. I've seen some of like OG's stream, etc., and he kind of looks like what your classic like reminds me of like Nero, where it's like you're just like kind of like a sad e-boy, you know, at times. You know? That's kind of like what it reminds me of at times. It's really good at video games. But like, I don't really know if that's true though. That might be a total mischaracterization, but like everyone else get that vibe sometimes though. When you see Nero and he's like a sad e-boy vibes. Doesn't mean he's sad or an e-boy. It just gives me the vibes. You know, it doesn't mean those things.
I understand the vibe that you're talking about.
Yeah,
I also, that is what concerns me if Gator's not on the team, because I'm missing that player on this squad that doesn't give off that vibe. Because again, maybe it's my own ignorance as to what these players provide when they're actually in the server, but I can't see that being driven by any of the DPS players, and I can't see that being driven by I mean, I'm not sure about Hawk actually. Does Hawk have that?
I mean, I know Hawk. I know
I-
Hawk can be assertive in the comms from his time from Atlanta.
I think
previously,
you
so.
guys would be surprised with how someone can go from sad e-boy personality when they're streaming and playing ranked. I think everyone's a sad little e-boy or e-girl when they're playing ranked, right? it's just a depressing time. When you get in the server, when the match happens, a lot of these guys come alive. And I think I would expect that from OG, Ultraviolet, Gator, like Hawk. Like, I think they would start to be a lot more assertive. And something like, I don't know if I can take this tangent right now, but the thing that I like the most about this team is they just have the same culture. These guys have like grown up together almost at this point. They know each other very well. They all are fighting for the same thing. And that's like one of the big things that helped Atlanta last year. When they went into the playoffs, they were like, we're a for-fun team. We don't even really care. And I think that really aided their ability to like, they understand each other. And I think that's going to help them push forward to like success because they're going to be driven in that way.
This is the cool all-American team that the Houston Outlaws wish they could be.
Yeah, literally.
Standing in the corner at the party. They don't know we have Pelican, you know? that
I
kind of
think
stuff.
I think overall, then the Reign, when we do it as like a holistic view, it's a bunch of really talented pieces and upcoming new players from NA contenders with some weird gaps of like maybe their flexibility is at question, but they could do really well, but we just haven't seen it. For example, like specifically their tank line, and also they're missing some gap. I think the double flex support possibility, like right off the bat, because we don't know. Obviously, OG could flex, but we're not quite sure. But we feel overall like they're pretty complete, and perhaps would you say more complete than last year?
That's my opinion. That they look more complete and more talented is a difficult thing to sell when Pelican isn't with the team anymore, but Speedily really is cracked. And I think the roster overall, it's hard to see them actually doing better than last year because last year they made it to the grand finals. But I think on a performance basis, this team can do better. I don't mean on a results basis, as in they will literally do better than grand finals, but I think on an average performance level, I think the ceiling is higher for this team than it was last year. But last year they really clicked in a way that they hadn't done previously.
Yeah, let's do potential rankings. Like, what's our out of the whole league? Where does this team potentially look to place? Does it go in the top 5, like Custa says? Does it live between the 5 to like 8 range? Like where are we looking at?
If it's top 5, then it's 5th, and if it's in the 5 to 10 range, it's hanging around the slightly higher level of there.
Well, who do you think?
Can I propose something? Can I propose an idea? Okay.
Yeah.
The Atlanta Reign in 2022 are going to be the top tier gatekeeper.
Oh, don't you bring up the gatekeeper? No.
So where is that exactly sitting though, Johnny? Where's that
sitting around like the 6th spot, okay? But let's bring it back. Okay, let's try to expand on this. Give it just like a minute. Can I get a minute of your time, Sideshow here? Okay,
please.
Yes. Okay, let's clear our mind and be open-minded to the idea of
you
the
have
top
55 seconds.
55 seconds. I don't need more. We already talked about it. They're a complete team. They have mostly filled all their holes. We were about the Winston wrecking ball. Doesn't matter.
Gotcha.
Great backline. You have tons of great DPS players. Speedily coming in, going to be a top tier DPS performer. You got an off tank. You got a main tank. It is a very complete team, and so they're going to be the gatekeeper of all these fucking idiots who are just like, we're gonna stick with one off tank. Vancouver Titans. We're just gonna stick with falls. Really, I mean, they're going to sign a main tank, but like a lot of teams just like, we're just going to stick to one tank. We have double flex support. Like Shock is like, we can put Violet on the Lucio. Houston Outlaws, who knows what they're going to do. New York Excelsior, double flex support. Like, I mean, and they're gatekeep teams like Washington that still have Decay and just never seem to get it right. Like, they'll be the gatekeeper of like complete, respectable top tier teams.
Okay, so are we agreeing with that? Do you think like 6-ish range?
The thing about the gatekeeper thing from what year was that? Was that
2020? I think it was when they were the gatekeepers. Yeah.
But they were like perfect gatekeepers. They never beat anyone above them and they never lost to anyone below them. It was almost scary how accurate that was to their performance. I still see this team punching. I don't see how this team lives in the perfect no man's land. This team's got all the pieces to be punching against teams that you would even power rank above them. I think this team's got talent.
Here's my question. Okay, so the reason I'm dying on this top 5 hill is like, do you think the San Francisco Shock is more reliably going to be top 5 than the Atlanta Reign?
Not without Super anymore.
And then with the Gladiators, with Arn's Paddy Pan, do you believe that the Gladiators can firmly sit in the top 5?
Yes.
I think we haven't discussed it. I think Gladiators are getting a little bit of the Hopium treatment. I think they're a little bit. I don't want to say that they're overrated because I do think that their roster is stacked, and we'll talk about this in their team preview. But I think people are taking for granted that this team is going to be insane, and I don't think I'm ready to just take it for granted. Going into last year, yes, they deservedly were like, top 2 NA. That was like the big combos last year because they had like their Birdring, Kevster, and they had a great front line back then, and we're really optimistic about New Space and the back line as well. Like they deserved that stamp, and they did really well in scrims. I think a lot of that was scrims. A lot of people were just like, Gladiators are like insane in scrims, and I think they deserve to be top 2.
They're already
this
insane
year.
in scrims.
I don't think Gladiators.
All right, well, that's for a topic for a different time, though. That's a topic for a different time. So pretty much seems holistically we're putting Reign in the upper echelons of the rankings, maybe breaking into the top 5. Definitely like very safe in that like 6 to 8 range, probably. Yeah. But top 5 is where they're kind of aiming for. Just to me, at least, I feel like they have some flexibility issues that probably need to be worked out. But that's where I think
those teams. Kurt, could you bring up those teams that are in their group that are in the North American group?
Well, I think we were just doing this holistically, though. Like, not even like.
Yeah, I know.
We weren't even doing it based off North America.
Like, it just bothered me though, because he's just been so bold with his top 5 statement.
He's been bold, but I think to me, I think top 5 is a little high when I look at it, but I think a safe like 6 to 8 range should be where they're probably trying to punch to.
If I'm allowed to say 6, I would feel so much better.
Okay, top 6, Johnny. We good. We all agree with top 6.
I mean, okay, so still like they're playing towards the upper echelon. Like I think because of the exit of Super for Shock, but like look at these other teams in comparison. Like when you really think about it, outside of like
Dallas,
some like Dallas Glads and like Shock, where they have admittedly a really good roster, Houston. But we don't know how it's going to work. And like Houston, like there's not really that many like amazing looking teams in North America.
They're a top 5 team.
Yeah. So they're looking to be in the upper echelon of teams. So realistically, look based off this, I think we can say the Reign are. If you're a Reign fan, be excited. You can continue to love a sad e-boy culture, but it's for America now. It's for America if you think about it.
He's just giving up.
Johnny's done. That's fair enough. And just be on the lookout for the Reign moving forward because we think they're going to be pretty good. But they still have some things to prove heading into the 2022 season. Yeah. So that was the Atlanta Reign preview. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Peace out.
Hey, Johnny.